Hi, my name is Kristen Kennedy, and I'm going to be talking about the gastric phase for our week 11 portfolio. The gastric phase begins when the food is chewed and swallowed and then transported into the stomach. There are three general functions of the stomach. The first is storage, and this is where it stores food and regulates its passage into the small intestine. This is also where most digestion and absorption takes place. It also helps regulate the amount of food that's going into the small intestines, because if too much goes into the small intestine, then digestion cannot perform properly. The next is digestion, where the stomach chemically and mechanically digests food into chyme, which is a soupy substance that is produced through digestion. The next is defense, where it protects the body by destroying bacteria or pathogens that could be ingested while eating. This can also include things stuck in the mucosal airway. And it also protects the stomach against itself because it can be damaged by its own secretions. So the first secretion that I will talk about is the Gastrin Secretions. The G cells are what secrete gastrin, and G cells can be found deep within the gastric glands. In short reflexes, this release is stimulated by the presence of amino acids and peptides in the stomach. Short reflexes are mediated by the gastrin-releasing peptides, and GRP for short, and they are ENS neurotransmitters. Cephalic reflexes parasympathetic neurons from the vagus nerves stimulate G cells to release gastrin into the blood. And gastrin's primary action is to promote acid release by acting on parietal cells and indirectly stimulating histamine release. So the next secretion that I will talk about are acid secretions. Parietal cells secrete gastric acid into the lumen of the stomach, and parietal cells can be found deep within the gastric glands. The average amount of acid secreted into the stomach is 1 to 3 liters per day, which can make the pH as low as 1. The cytoplasmic pH of parietal cells is around 7.2, which means that hydrogen are being pumped against the gradient that is more concentrated. So the functions include the release and activation of pepsin, which digests protein, somatostatin, released from D cells, which I will talk about more in the upcoming slides. Hydrogen chloride natures proteins, which breaks down disulfide and hydrogen bonds that hold the protein in its tertiary structure. It helps kill bacteria and inactivates salivary amylase, and it's stopping carbohydrate digestion that began in the mouth. So this is a diagram that I got from our textbook about the parietal cell pathway for acid secretion, and this path begins when hydrogen from water inside the parietal cell is pumped into the stomach lumen by the hydrogen potassium ATPase in exchange for potassium coming into the cell. Then chloride then follows the electrical gradient created by hydrogen by moving through an open chloride channels. The result of this is secretion of hydrogen chloride by the cell. So the next slide is enzyme secretion. So the stomach produces 2 enzymes. So pepsin, it carries out initial digestion of proteins. It's very effective on collagen, so very important when digesting meat. And it's also secreted as pepsinogen. An inactive enzyme secreted by G cells, and this is stimulated by the short reflex of the ENS. The other enzyme that it produces is gastric lipase, and this enzyme that is the one that breaks down triglycerides. It is co-secreted by pepsin, and then less than 1/3 of fat digestion takes place in the stomach. The next secretion is the paracrine secretions. So first we have histamine. It is secreted by enterochromafin-like cells in response to gastrin or acetylcholine stimulation. It stimulates acid secretion by combining with hydrogen receptors on parietal cells. There are receptor antagonists that block histamine action and are the second class of drugs to treat acid hypersecretion. Intrinsic factors are proteins secreted by the same gastric parietal cells that secrete acid, and this complexes with vitamin B12, which is needed for vitamin absorption in the intestines. Somatostatin is a hypothalamic growth hormone inhibiting hormone. It is secreted by the D cells, and it shuts down acid secretion by decreasing gastrin and histamine secretion. It also inhibits pepsinogen secretion, and it is also the primary negative feedback symbol for the gastric secretions.